Hello, and thank you for joining. My name is Monique Bryant, and I serve as your Director of System Outcomes for Hope Connections, and I also serve as your Regional HMIS Administrator for the Northwest Louisiana region. Again, thank you for joining today on this training. We will be talking about correcting errors. So we've talked about that quite a bit, but we have some new people who have just joined us as HMIS users, and we are still seeing some errors. You guys as a whole are doing great. The errors have reduced drastically. So we thought it would be necessary to kind of go over and refresh on errors just so that we can, get a better handle on it. Again, as a whole, we've done so much better. But there are some errors that we can still correct, so that when HUD reporting season starts again, we just ended that in April. HUD reporting season for us is through the month of January, so right at point in time to April is when we are reporting all of these numbers to HUD and trying to clean up data and things like that. This year was much better. There was a lot of data to clean up still, but it was not as much as in the previous year. So that tells me that we are doing so much better, and I think we can get even better for in preparation for next HUD reporting season. So give yourselves a hand for the work that you're doing as far as your data quality. But again, we're going to go over that today just so that we can get a better hold of it for next HUD reporting season. All right, so to run the data quality report, what you would have to do is go to the reports tab over here. You would find the tile that says 2023 data quality framework. And then you would choose your provider. Once you're already in your provider, you'll just choose, the one that you normally work on, or some of you have several, so you may need to run several reports to get all of your programs. But today I am just going to mirror our coordinated access program. And I just so happen to know the provider ID, so I would type that there. If you don't know the provider ID and you just know the name of the program, you could type that here and click search. But I just did the provider ID, and I'm going to do submit, and it pops up for me right there. And what I'll do is I'll run it for the date ranges that I'm looking at. So it just depends on what you want to do. So like if you just want to look at what you've done in the last week, if you just want to look at what you did today, if you want to look at it from the vantage point of what you've done fiscal year to date or year to date, whatever you're looking at, you're welcome to put that date there. However, I do suggest doing the fiscal year. So the fiscal year started October 1, 2022, and then I'll go up until today's date. And anytime you're just going to click in today's date, you can just click that green check and it'll populate today's date for you, whatever today's date is when you're running your report. All right, and my entry exit type is HUD. I know some of you do VA, some of you may do RI or PATH or BASIC. Whatever entry exit type you use when you're entering your data, you would click that for that particular project or provider, and you would click build a report. And when you click build report, you're going to see a tab up here that says running in blue. And you want to wait until it's completed. And to check to see if it's completed, you just hit refresh. Sometimes it takes a little longer, but in this instance, it went to complete it pretty quickly. And you'll hit the magnifying glass to get the report. Once you hit the magnifying glass, all you have to do is scroll. And to look at data quality, what we're looking at specifically is section Q2 to section Q5. And I've set this tons of times before, but ideally you want to see all zeros. If you see a number, that means there are some errors associated with that number. There are that many errors associated with this data quality check right here, okay? And so what you want to do is any of the numbers that you see, they're basically a hyperlink. It doesn't take you anywhere, but it does show you the data included with that number. So here, missing information is 2, and you can see the 2 clients that are associated. You can't click them and go to it. Basically, you'll just have to write down that client ID or do a copy and paste so that you can pull that client up and correct whatever error it is associated with that particular client. And so what I want to do is look at maybe at least one of each of these errors that we have for coordinated access for that date range and see if we can correct them. Now, I will preface this training by saying that Service Point can be a little quirky. So if by chance you go in and you correct the error, and when you run the report again, that error is still there, then a lot of times what happens with that is it needs to be corrected on the back end. And so if you've done all you can do, then the thing to do is to email us. Say, hey, I have this client ID that had, let's say, a gender error, and I've put in the gender, but the error still populates on the report. It's not correcting for me. And so then what we will do is we will look at it on the back end to see if there's some metadata that we could possibly clear up. Sometimes we may have to call in Will Sky to kind of look at what's going on, but for the most part, if you can't fix it, then send it to us and we will try to correct it on our end, okay? So let's see today what we can correct. So we are in the training site, of course, because we can play all day in the training site, but we don't want to do that in the live site. But of course, if you're correcting your live data, then you would be in the live site. But we're just going to be playing around today in the training site. Okay. All right. So the first error that we see is associated with a social security number. So in this section, personally identifiable information, you have name errors. And I would suggest if you ever have a name error, don't even try to fix it, because that is something we have to do over on this side. But do notify us of the error so that we can work with you to fix that. Social security number error, sometimes that means the social security number is not entered, or there's a partial social security number. I know we have one agency who only uses partial social security number, so they're going to have errors all of the time because it's just their policy not to put that in. However, if you are able to put in the entire social security number, you should not have an error. But again, like I said, Service Point can be quirky and it may be there, and you're still populating an error. Okay. And then also the data quality check question. So the question that says, is this a full social, partial social, client doesn't know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If it says anything other than full, then that there will be an error that populates. Okay. Same thing with date of birth. If there's no date of birth entered, or if that question that's asking about the full or the partial is not answered, you will get an error. All right. Ethnicity, if it's left blank, you will get an error. Gender, same thing. If it's blank, you will get an error. All right. So let's go to the first one, which is social security number. And we are going to choose Bugs Bunny, number 137. All right. Social security number. So as you can see, this client has 3 different projects that they've been in, but the report that we ran was for CAP coordinated assessment. So that is the project that we will be focused on throughout this call. Okay, so there are 2 places that you will go to, one of 2 places that you would go to, or both, depending on how many errors that particular client had. You will either correct those errors in the client profile, or you will correct those errors in the entry exit associated with the project that you're working on. So the first one is social security number. So social security numbers are corrected in the client profile. Okay. And so to correct an error in the client profile, wherever that error is, you would select the edit pencil. And this error again was social security number, right? And so as we can see, there is no social security number entered for this client. And there's no social security number data quality entered for this client. Okay? So if we looked at our report, this particular client should have 2 errors for social security number. One for missing information, and the other one for data issues for social security number. And it was. So what I'm going to do is enter a social security number. And I am going to go ahead and answer the social security number data quality question and say that this is the full social reporting. All right. And when we run that report again, we should see client ID 137 is no longer under missing information and no longer under data issues for social security number. All right. So the next error that was on that report was for race. So for that one, I noted client 138, which is Bugs Bunny Jr. And again, the CAP coordinated access. But since this is a race, it is under client profile. And that one happens to be under, the race question happens to be under client demographics. So we'll go into that pencil. And the reason we have this particular error is because primary race was answered as client doesn't know. So anytime you use a client doesn't know, client refused, data not collected, you're going to see an error. So Service Point wants you to actually choose a primary race. And we do know that all races are not included in the answers. So HUD is actively working on that. As a matter of fact, the new HUD data standards come out at the end of the year, like September, October. And so we're preparing now to train you guys on the new data elements that will be coming out at that time. And so there are, I think, 2 more races included. Don't quote me on that, but there are going to be other races included. So what you'll do is just choose the race that your client put on their intake form. And we're just going to say Bugs is American Indian. Secondary race, you don't necessarily have to choose unless the client indicates something on their intake form that they have a secondary race. And then also for ethnicity, this client should have an error under ethnicity as well, because again, client doesn't know is chosen. So we are going to choose an ethnicity so that so that we won't have that particular error. Okay. And we're going to save that. Okay, and then the next error was gender. Not sure if I corrected that one, but we'll go back to Bugs Bunny and we will look at gender. So now here is one again. We are live, right? We are looking at the live data in the training site, right? And when you click that pencil, as you can see, there is a gender selected, right? So we have an error for client 137 that says gender. So this may be one that you would email to us to say, hey, I've tried, the answer is there. I don't know what else to do. So sometimes what you can do is you can just kind of clear all, hit it again, save, and then we'll test our theory. We'll look at it when we run the report again to see if that error is gone. Okay. And we're just going to exit that. Okay. And then the next error on that report had to do with veteran status. So we're going to look at client 137 again. And as you can see, U.S. military veteran, there's no answer. So to do that, you would go into the client profile and you would go to this pencil because that's where that question is. And you would click the appropriate response for your client. So we're going to say no. And we're going to exit. Okay. And the next error had to do with relationship to head of household. And the client that I chose for that one was 156. And relationship to head of household, you would have to go under the entry exit tab, find your appropriate program, just in case, there were several programs that this client had been in, you would make sure you're choosing the right one. You would go into the project start date pencil, save and continue. And then you would go down to where it says relationship to head of household. Now, again, this is the coordinated access assessment. Your assessment may look a little bit different for your program. However, you should have that question somewhere on that assessment. And so what you would do is, the reason that there is an error is because there's no answer selected for relationship to head of household. It looks like Miss, what is her name? Kitty Cat is single. So she herself would be the head of household. All right. And so when we run that report after we save and exit, when we run our report again, we should see her no longer on the relationship of head of household error. Okay. The next error was for client location. And everybody should know that the client location for us is LA 502. We're going to put in client number 157, which is Danny Smith. We're going to go into the entry exit tab, go into the coordinated access project start date pencil, save and continue. And we will look for client location. Here's client location. It's blank, which is the reason why we have that error. So we would choose the appropriate client location, which is always LA 502 for our region. And then we will save and exit. And again, just like the other errors, once we run our report again, we should see that that error no longer exists for this client. Okay. The next error, disabling condition. I'm going to choose client number 286, which is Destiny Watkins. We're going to go into the entry exit tab, go into the appropriate program that we're working on, hit that edit pencil by project start date, save and continue. And as we scroll down, we want to look for disabling condition, which on this assessment is kind of far down, close to the bottom here. Again, your assessment may look different. So just go to your question that says, does the client have a disabling condition? And as you can see, there is nothing selected. Now, the important thing to remember about any errors that happen in this area here, like monthly income, non-cash, health insurance, or disabling condition, there's two parts to it. So you want to make sure you answer the question, and then you want to make sure that you go into the assessment to answer the appropriately according to what you put here. So we're going to say that this client does not have a disabling condition and choose no. And again, what this question is looking for is either a yes or a no. If you choose any of this stuff, you're going to still get an error. Okay, so make sure you know yes or no if your client has a disability. So we're going to say no, and then we're going to click the magnifying glass just to see all of the appropriate responses. There's 8 of them. And you want to make sure that everything says no, because if something says yes, if you go in and say, for instance, that this client has a physical disability and you put yes, then you're going to get an error because you said no here and then you said yes to something in there. So it needs to match. So if it says yes here, then something in here needs to say yes to match it. Or if it says no here, then everything in here needs to say no. Okay? So we're going to save and exit, and hopefully we won't see client 286 on our report when we run it. And we have 3 more, one for destination, one for income sources at start, and one for income sources at exit. So we're going to do the destination one first. And the client that I've chosen for that is 356, which is Monique Bryant. We're going to go into the entry exit tab, and we have 2 coordinated access entries. So we're going to go to the one that is still open. And for destination, I'm sorry, we are going to the one that is closed because destination is the error, and destination only comes into play when you're entering the destination that the client went to after they left your program. Okay, so we are going to go into the exit date pencil because again we're dealing with destination. All right, and the reason we have an error for this particular client is because a reason for leaving is unknown or disappeared, and destination, which really this is what we're looking at, destination says no exit interview completed. So when you use something down here other than deceased, it's going to give you an error. Okay. And matter of fact, I think, don't quote me on this either, but I think it'll give you an error for deceased. But if it does, I mean, if you know that client is deceased, there's nothing else you can choose. But try to stay away from any of these other things down here, and make sure that you choose something up here. If they were a homeless situation, meaning they maybe went back on the street or they went to another shelter or safe haven, you can choose that. If they went to an institution, you know, somewhere like jail or nursing home or something like that, and then temporary or permanent housing situations. So we're just going to say this client went to live with somebody, okay, with friends, okay. Generally gravitate towards temporary. Sorry, hang on. Temporary versus family. So you see there's a friends temporary, family temporary, and family permanent, friends permanent. Only because that helps us with our return to homelessness numbers. If we were to choose permanent and that client came back into the system homeless again, then we pretty much get dinged for that at HUD. So we want to kind of gravitate towards the temporary tenures for clients that we know who are going to stay with somebody. Okay. And for notes, you can just put in like, the address or whatever, but that error is really looking at this question right here. How did we answer this question? Okay. Save and continue. We don't really need to do anything there. Save and exit. And so that error should be clear when we go back to run our report. All right. And then the next one, income sources at start. We're going to go into client 439. And we're going to go into the entry exit. Project start date pencil. Save and continue. And this question is looking at income sources at start. And that is this question right here. Remember, I said there's two parts to these questions, okay? So the income from any source, nothing is selected, right? But it looks like the client has income from what it says right here. So we want to make sure that that matches. So we're going to say, yes, the client has income. And you want to go to the red triangles on each of these to make sure that you change it to, that it changes to a green check. And how you do that is you'll just click that. What I normally do is I'll click no for everything. Yes was already selected for SSI on here, so we'll just save and exit. And now it's a green check. It's just saying make sure you answer all of the questions that are inside of the assessment. Okay, so that answering those questions will change this red triangle to a green check. Okay, so when we look at client 439, hopefully we don't have an income sources at start error. And speaking of all of those red triangles, when you're going in to correct an error that you see on your data quality report, if you see other errors, go ahead and fix them. You don't have to go, one by one, because as you start fixing them, you're going to know that, oh, okay, well, this client will have an error here too, because I see that this question is not answered. So you can, update all of those questions that causes errors at one time. Okay, and then the last one is income sources at exit. We're going to go to client 356 again, go to the entry exit tab, and this time we're going to go to the exit pencil because this is income sources at exit. The one that we just fixed was income sources at start. So we're going to save and continue. And we're going to go to that income question. And as you can see, again, it doesn't match. So here it says no, but there is income listed in there. So what we would need to do is change that to yes. And then save and exit. Okay. All right. So we're at 29 minutes. So we're going to go over and check the report real quick. And so what you don't want to do is go into the last report because that's just going to pull up the last report. It's not going to show the update. So you want to make sure you build that report again. Make sure it's completed. and just start looking at the errors. Okay, so we'll start from the bottom. Okay, income sources at exit, there are 0 errors, so that means client number 356 was corrected. Income sources at start, we still have 3 errors, but again, we only fixed one of those, and it was client 439. Client 439 is not there, so that means we fixed that error. The next one was disabling condition. There were 9 errors before. Now there's 8, and we fixed client 286. Client 286 is not listed, so we corrected that one. Client location. Client location was client number 157. So client 157 is not there, so that means we corrected that error. Relationship to head of household, we fixed client number 156. Client 156 is not there, so that error is corrected. Veteran status, we corrected client 137. Client 137 is no longer there, so that means we corrected it. All right, ethnicity was the next one. We fixed client number 138. Client number 138 is no longer there. And for race, we have 0 errors, and that's because we fixed client number 138, which was there in the beginning. And social security number, we fixed client number 137 is no longer there. And then data issues, we fixed client number 137 as well, and client number 137 is no longer there. So we have fixed all of the errors that we set out to fix. And so again, what you would do if this was your live data and you were correcting your errors, you would make sure that you touch each one of these clients to fix those errors. So that is it. I hope you have more clarification about correcting your errors, and if you have any trouble, again, make sure that you reach out to us so that we can correct those errors that you simply cannot fix. All right, you guys have a great day, and thank you again.